God of mercy, full of grace, you are forever, always forever. Slow to anger, reconciled. As your people sing of your majesty, Lord, hear the sound. Lord, hear the sound. God of mercy, full of grace, you forever, always forever. We your kingdom shine, Lord, your praises free. As your people sing of your majesty, Lord, hear the sound. As your people sing of your majesty, Lord, hear the sound. Everyone, you forgive, everyone. To let the heavens roll, and through the cross they run. To let the heavens roll, and through the cross they run. Morning, Watershed. So I want to invite you into, it's been really meaningful for me because this is a time where I sit in contemplation and think about my roots. And so roots among pain, roots among generational trauma. But yet I think about the matriarchs in my family and our free African ancestors. Joy unspeakable is drum talk that invites the spirits to dance with us. They tell tall tales by the fire. For the desert mothers and fathers, joy unspeakable is respite from the maddening crowds and freedom from church as usual. For enslaved Africans during the Middle Passage, joy unspeakable is the surprise of living one more day. In the freeing embrace of death, chosen and imposed. For Africans in bondage in the Americas, joy unspeakable is that moment of mystical encounter when God tiptoes into the hush arbor, testifies about divine suffering and whispers in the tap dancing boogie woogie rap rock blue griots who also hear God. Joy unspeakable is the space-time unlikely merger of trance and high-tech lives, ecstatic songs and a jazz repertoire. Joy unspeakable is a symphony of incongruities, of faces aglow and hearts on fire, and the wonder of surviving together.
Blessed are the ones who do not bury all the broken pieces of their heart. Blessed are the tears. Blessed are the wounded ones open to the healing touch of God. Blessed are the ones who walk in. Blessed are the keys that go. So when them God, blessed is the soul still have strength to love their enemies. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. Hope is in the Lord. It's not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. That you would give us open hearts to your healing hands. That you'd allow us to be present and fully here in these moments ahead. We thank you for your love that chases us and pursues us. In your name we pray. We're so glad you're here with us this morning, and we want to let you know if you're new and you didn't stop by our info table that's in the back of the auditorium. Immediately following this gathering, we'd love to have some of the staff just say hi to you and meet you back there. And if you haven't filled out any information, we have that there. We do have a Watershed app. It's free that you can download. We try to be paperless, so we invite you into that and to joining us into the many social media formats. We're there, and there's so much going on beyond Sunday morning that we'd love to invite you into. But before we go any further, we want to invite you to say hi to some of the people sitting near you, maybe make a little room for those still coming in looking for a seat, and we'll continue on.
Our church. And so thank you for being here. If you are new, got a chance to meet some of you, but we would love to be able, like Taryn said, connect with you at last call on the way out. And I have this privilege of being with 42 or so of you guys and gals who are saying we're beginning to own this community a little bit. We're intrigued with it. We're not sure what our next step is, but if you're interested in being a part of the next one, this one's full. The next one starts in about 7 or 8 weeks. If you're interested, you can go to our Watershed website. You can go to the information table at the back. You can look at some leadership and with blocks and the administrative area and some of the nuances of day-to-day. So while she's doing that, we've been also on the hunt for a new children's pastor here at Watershed. And several months ago, after a relatively extensive process, we found and got a chance to kind of hear your thoughts and have you meet Blair. And what we found in Blair has been absolutely amazing. It's been our community, her heart and her love for people, her heart and her love for students, her many years of being in this area and being an expert in terms of family and children. So I'm going to ask you, Watershed, to give our new staff person, a new pastor of children, Blair Gore, a warm hand. Come on up, Blair.
Good morning. Good morning. So like Scott said, my name is Blair, and he used the word giddy. And so I'm going to share in that because I'm a little giddy to be here with you guys. So I grew up pretty close to the beach, but kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So I've always had a heart for the city. So I'm super excited with you and to hear yours as well. But my friend Michelle, she's back there somewhere. She's actually want to introduce myself. So I'm just so excited. But I am looking forward to hearing your stories. I am looking forward to connecting with our local community. I'm looking forward to making memories with you and your families. And I'm convinced that kids are the best humans in the world. And I can't wait to share those glimpses of the amazing forward to meeting you all.
Thank you, Blair. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Blair. So get ready. You're going to get the emails. You're going to get the opportunities to jump into her leadership system and her model in the way that is meaningful for her and her experiences. 15, I think you said, years of experience in the developmental age of your child and where they are in terms of how they see faith and spirituality. And hopefully the two can dovetail well together. And your child, ultimately, sometimes a little bit unknown, and that's okay. And so to invest in a program like what Blair is doing and going to be doing in the days ahead. So when we talk about $13,000 a week, when we talk about the opportunity we get to impact investing, if you're a guest with us, if you're new, we invite you to be new. It's okay. You sit back. This is not a conversation for you yet. Excited about this next series that begins today, and thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to invite Sierra to come on up and share her heart.
Good morning. Oh, thanks. My name's Sierra, and I've been coming to Watershed for about a year and a half. My family and I moved here about 2 summers ago from Phoenix, and we started coming here pretty much right away. We've moved enough to know that we needed people, and we're really glad that we found everybody here. Her Block, which I highly recommend. It's great. I love everybody. And this week, it's my turn to answer the question, what's saving you right now? And I didn't know how different the East and the West Coast were until I actually went to a beach here. If you haven't been to the West Coast, the beaches, the water's really cold. It comes down from Alaska, and the waves come in like these big sets. So you'll get a huge group of waves, and then it'll kind of peter out, and there'll be a minute or two where nothing happens, and then more will come in. So when I grew up, I spent the summers with my little brother doing junior lifeguards at the beach while my mom worked. And then when my husband Keith and I were dating, we would do an ocean swim every Friday after work. Sometimes not the best conditions, but we did it anyway. We moved from San Diego to Boise to finish undergrad in our late 20s. We were late bloomers. And then we got married a year later. And then when she was 6 months old, we moved from Boise to Phoenix. She's a big helper. I told Keith at one point that I was pretty sure it was the worst year of my life. My dad passed away right after we got here. We'd only been here about a month. And everybody alive, I'm trying to work. And by November, I was completely fried. So I quit my full-time job in February to go down to get super sad. And not long after that, we had this leak in our house, and the ceiling of our living room collapsed while I was at work. And I just want to pause again to plug blocks because my preface block ladies showed up. I remember telling Keith that I felt like I was drowning. I remember saying to him, like, I can't breathe. Like, I can't get any air. And I felt like I was that little kid in the ocean, just getting tumbled by wave after wave and coming up and hoping for a breath of air and just getting like a face full of water. And I found myself taking a deep breath every now and then just because I could. And I'd get a text that Keith was stuck at work and he'd be home late. So I'd take a deep breath. The girls would ask me to play Into the Unknown for the 30th time in a row and just exist. That's saving me today. So I'd like to give you some time to reflect on what's saving you right now. And if, like me, for a good while there, I couldn't think of anything that was saving me, I invite you to simply close your eyes and breathe.
You and so many of your stories. But this song is not one of those. It started a long time ago, but at the behest of several friends, Tommy being one of them, said, I think our community needs to hear this. And so I want you to know when you hear it, if it's not where you are, it's okay. It's all me. It's all right. But maybe if you do relate with it, just to feel reminded that you are loved no matter where you are on this journey. And I was listening to a podcast this past week, by a couple guys that my sons love their YouTube channel, Rhett and Link, and they have a podcast called, I think, Ear Biscuits, which tells you how serious they are. But in this one, Rhett was sharing some of his faith journey, a halter top, and then for some, just like a string bikini, and then maybe nothing, just no sweater of faith. And I loved it and laughed and also felt like that's such a great description. Like if we could all see visibly where we all are, what we're really wearing or not, maybe it would be comforting to know that it's okay whatever we are pulling at and questioning, that the one thing I've found in the to my lost religion, I have so much to say to you. For years I bought your truth, I gave you my youth, with little left to show for it but scars. Sacred church traditions, Trump loving those outside these walls. While slaves were building steeples, we missed the point that people are the very house of God. Savior of the children of God, who sits the welcome in the gospel you wonder where I'm gone, you will find me put the place, put the place. See the kingdom where there's room enough for every kind of love, every one of us. You taught me how to love, and you praised me for doing that. Say we're all the children of God, who sends the children to bed. There's the liberation, there's the love, and the gospel is spread. Wonder where I'm going, you find me love is pulling up the rest till only love is left. Pulling up the rest till only love is left. Pulling up the rest till only love is left.
Good morning. My name is Matt. I'm one of the co-pastors here at Watershed. And the way that I want to begin this series is by showing you an incredibly profound picture. This is a picture of me when I was 8 years old. Grandparents, Grandma Eloise and Grandpa Bill. And we lived, my family and I, we lived in the northern part of Kentucky. Would travel to Ohio to see Reds games and things of that nature, in Cincinnati, which was just a few minutes away. And when I was 8, there was a series of devastating tornadoes that swept through northern Kentucky and Ohio and wreaked havoc on communities. People lost their lives. And I remember this event because we lost power at our house out on our farm. The lights went out. And we had some neighbors that lived in a house trailer, and the wind got so high that their trailer started to rock, and they ran to our house. And we spent the evening in Cincinnati and all the warnings and such. And that was the first night that I remember as a boy thinking about my own death. So I was scared. And I was also a Baptist, which meant that not only was I afraid of dying, I was afraid of what happens to you after you die in the next life. And so the next morning together, and I started to pray to ask this Jesus into my heart and to pray that God would forgive me of for some reason. And then also my mom was assuring me that now that this sort of box had been checked, there was nothing for me to worry about moving forward. But I got baptized about a week later in this small country church. And I remember afterwards running up to Miss Dorothy, who was the pastor's wife, back of the pew, and those little cup holders. Like, do I go and drink the leftovers every time we do this. She said, the Lord wants you to serve him by going behind us when communion is over once a month and picking up the plastic cups and putting them in the garbage. Oh, okay. Yeah. You know, in my 8-year-old mind, to this day, I can remember how woefully underwhelming that sounded. I just escaped death. Like I just escaped hell. Moments or seasons in my life where I was trying to answer the question, what does this mean? And what am I supposed to be doing? I'm convinced of after 54 years of life and doing this for almost 25 years now, that there's numerous dangers that undermine us asking the questions, but the two biggest dangers that undermine an authentic pursuit of trying to answer the question, what is our divine calling or divine vocation? One of those is actually just running from God. And that's really kind of state the obvious at one level, right? Like when you're turned away from any sort of pursuit of God, it would be really hard to answer the question, well, honestly, with the thing under the thing that disrupts or paralyzes your life the most. I have this friend who sat down, and for 30 minutes straight, he talked about how good his life was now. And he said, I have discovered that, my physical fitness, focusing on getting in shape and my diet and just my mindset. And so 30 minutes into this experience with no breath, finally, my friend takes a breath and says, what do you, And I said, no, don't hear me being hard on you. It's just that, how do you know you haven't traded one addiction for another? Like, how do you know that you aren't using your obsession with fitness and health and these gym visits to see his body language sort of melt? And he said, I didn't think about that. And he was still running. Get questions in your life, least of which being, or the most of which being, what am I supposed to do with this thing that is to this question? I think when you're convinced that you have a superior view of God or a superior view of reality, I think this undermines your ability to discern purpose. When you become convinced that there's nothing more to see, there's nothing more to hear, there's nothing more to discover, it becomes really hard, because when you're convinced, when the conversation is over, how do you self-critique? How do you become accept self-importance and certitude and an addiction to safety often that robs you of the process of dealing honestly with whatever inconsistencies or dark places in your soul that deep down continue to undermine some sense of wholeness or joy or intimacy with God? And Jesus addressed both of these scenarios, didn't he? I mean, for the person who was running, he would say things like, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is it God longs for you to have, but it's not in that direction. Go and sin no more was his language for that type of person. Stop including things in your life that rob you from the wholeness and the oneness that's possible with God, yourself, and others. And then for the person or group who believe their view of reality is the only view, and who often harm in the name of God or in the name of Christ. He would say things like, you're throwing on the outside, but you left stuff in the cup and it rotted. It's grimy on the inside. When Watershed started in 2005, the whole point of our community, we said, was about transformation and relationships. But our idea behind transformation, if we're really honest with ourselves, in hindsight, was really more about assimilation. It was really more about this unyielding commitment to some objective truths about God and eternity and human sexuality and politics and economics and culture. Now, our version of running, arguably, was arrogance or some sense of being naive. And whether we wanted to admit it or not, there was this undercurrent of getting folks on the same theological, spiritual, and moral page. It was about behavioral management. It was more about getting. And what started to happen was we kept wounding the people that we were trying to include or that we wanted to help. We were completely tone deaf to the complexities and the deep scars that sometimes are held in structures that disproportionately create disadvantage consistently for the same groups of people. And to begin to realize this, which again, to be totally transparent, personally or otherwise, when you're running from God, or when you think you already have all the answers. Paul, after having like this mystical encounter with the resurrected Jesus, he redirects his life. He takes that whole repent thing really seriously, a turn of events. And not just one of them, he ends up being one of their most prolific leaders. And these Christians that he's partnering with and in community with, they all had shared this common bond of the risen Jesus, whether it was literal or mythical or mystical or metaphorical. They were bonded together by this experience that they all laid claim to having, and their struggle, their marginalization, their exploitation. And they were struggling with their identity, struggling with how to organize themselves or prioritize their roles, or their 12 chapters are Paul trying to kind of name all of these things that are going on, and almost like this wise sage, this grandparent figure, and in this real calming and inspiring way, he says, listen, we are at each other's throats over power and greed. Symbol. I'm just making noise. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, what is in part disappears. He says, when I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, face to face, now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. When you stop running from God, when you set aside your self-importance, your self-righteousness, and the blindness begins to dissipate, there's a different passion that emerges, and this passion is not just for your situation, it's a passion for the world. And Paul ends this statement by saying, and now these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. For centuries, like this is a go-to excerpt in the church, isn't it? If you've been raised in the church, this isn't the first time you've heard this. And if you have been to a wedding, this certainly isn't the first time you've heard this, right? How many of you had this in your wedding before? Oh, really? Only 4? Yeah, I've done your weddings. I know that's a lie, all right? I mean, it's poetic, right? But these have been, the reason that these are so powerful, they're powerful because they're true, but they're powerful because these words were written in community. Like, we think they're powerful. Can you imagine how powerful they would have been for this community? Because these words were their shared humanity, born out of the flesh and the blood of the pursuit of trying to name what was real and true for their life, given their context as they're chasing after God. And it would be easy for us to go, well, we got to find ours. And I mention this because for a couple of years now, we've struggled in this area. We haven't known sometimes how to talk about who we are. And about this time last year, we started to realize that we have to and so we were trying to make sense. What's the language? And it was really challenging. Like, how do you create clarity around a community or a church that's marked more by its evolutionary journey than its own self-proclaimed authority, power, or certainty? How do you even begin to describe that? Like, what sort of words do you choose to embody in a sense of direction or missional purpose in light of what's happening in the world around you today, in our city, in our nation, in our world, in our climate? How do you do this in light of the individual pain and plight of people walking less people to have a seat at the table and to occupy and own that well? As a community waking up to its own blindness, its implicit biases, its complicity to structures of sexism and racism and economic disparity and the destruction of 24/7 throughout their life, throughout the generations of their family, and who have been here for 15 straight years having your back, and you've just been silent. I so appreciated Thomas weekend. But in the name of full disclosure, we've been doing this for 15 years, and this is the first time we've ever done that. Better. But I wanted to mention this because it underscores what I'm trying to articulate. How do you wrestle to the ground the best words that allow for these types of realizations and self-edits moving forward, and to what end? What are we trying to do? And how do you create sustainable language that reduces the perpetual wounding of others so that the people who are here don't have to keep hearing you apologize? We missed that one again. I'm so sorry. Our blindness, our words wounded you, or further disenfranchised you, or caused you to somehow continue to hold on to shame. Paint on the walls. What words do we etch on each other's hearts and minds, realizing this won't be for everyone? As much as you try to extend your arms, in spite of how hard you work to meet people where they are, for some, world that's the most important to create is the one where love of neighbor as oneself is actually happening. Do you see how complicated this is? This is hard work. My friend, Tommy, this is Tommy. He pokes fun at us some. He's been around for many years now. And he says, you guys are always, that's who we are. Watershed is a community. We are a spiritual tribe and a beautiful mess. We come from all over the place, all walks of life, all sorts of stories, strengths, gifts, problems, life experiences, original starting points. But it's within this context of community that we long to see, and even things that we don't want to see. And Jesus insisted that any type of new life, any type of new creation, any type of different world to be created, like waking up was the first step. He was constantly talking about waking up, no longer being blind, being able to hear. And to the extent that we begin to see how deeply loved we are. Like sometimes that's the issue. Life. Laying down one's life for your friends, selling possessions, giving your last coin, turning the other cheek, giving a goal towards a world that's worth creating. Not in the past. Can we be clear about that? This isn't about going backwards. And it's not about hitting the eject button. It's about what's happening right now. The kingdom at hand, he would call it. The already not yet world of cast some of Paul's thinking. We get to name and get to struggle towards, and we get to do this together. Watershed is you felt safe enough, inspired enough, courageous enough to be honest with yourself, to be honest with God, and maybe you were even honest with a few friends, but to identify, you could now name, whether it was the addiction or the pattern of behavior or failure or pain or disillusionment, or this, you were given a watershed moment. Yeah, I did that. But like not in the water, there is a dividing point, and the water must flow in one direction or another. That's how we actually came up with this name. You were presented in front of you the choice to continue to be blind or realize you were waking up and go in a direction that was unfamiliar, that felt dangerous, but that presents to you true life. And can I tell you that your willingness to struggle towards that, the amount of love that you unleash into this community and into this world is profound. This world needs places like this. This is how love gets unleashed. This is who we are, not because or a family or the way that you're attempting to live, but can I suggest just more in tune with the death and the resurrected Christ, more kissed by God, more real? Can I suggest that these are words worth embracing for anyone who understands the urgency of what's at stake within the perpetual problems that we're faced with in our city, our communities here in Charlotte, in our nation, and in our world, and on this planet? If you had to articulate your purpose, could these words be out together? So God, this morning, I'm reminded of how you in the scriptures would often, especially in the life of Christ, it was never about the dramatic. It was always about these underplayed mustard seed moments that produced yields that no one saw coming. And certainly in our church culture, Christian culture, that will ignite me, as though somehow emotions are what sustain work. And that's just not true. If this is all about some type of consumeristic emotionality, then we're all setting ourselves up for failure. What if this is like one of those mustard seed moments that we begin to embrace and chew on as a community and as individuals? And it's just like this slow drip of reality that continues to bring us back to where we need to be, so that we actually can have some type of an impact in the world, not just with each other. Thank you for your patience with this community, for the people that you bring in this direction, and whatever stewardship moments when somehow the table gets bigger.
So, to close, I invite you into another. Worship is a contemplative practice. So, however, this sitting, standing, hands open, hands on your heart, I invite you to be in this moment. So, we're going to interweave some spoken word with this next closing piece. And the beauty of worship is that we get to be in this collective experience together, when so much we're in our individual lives. And often I think sometimes the mistake with church is we bring that individual experience into the church where we're supposed to be joining. I'm losing my religion. Thank God. I prayed about my decision. How odd. For the man with the mic to be the man all his life, while Christ-like stripes it with REM or above the RPM. How do I begin to try to paint this sin of rules that divides God's people in two? In the beginning, religion created a mask. The Reformation helped, but soon the patch didn't last. I don't tell, you don't ask. So we created a lie. And for generations, church was where we went to go hide, or we no longer tried, because rules read our relationships was empty inside, leaves you bitter, dry. Swift to cut you like a razor, swift to call you a traitor, because you're swift to love Taylor. Now we got bad blood with our neighbor. Who's wrong? Who's right? Every Sunday we're divided. Who's black? Who's white? Come on!
So I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down, I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down,
Another man in the mirror never gets race right. He'll never be Christ-like. Never receive good pay, so your faith never rises above minimum wage. So when it's time to save the world, you don't know what to say to your brother that you love when he tells you he's gay. Do you push him away, judge him down till he leaves, gives him a gospel he hears or a gospel he sees? Love wrapped in truth is the gospel he needs. There's room at the cross for everyone, even me. Well, my sins are now clean, the lost now redeemed. Religion is a prison, but truth sets us free. Helps us believe that the world we're now in is not the world that will be. Terror, famine, disease, millions in poverty. Hungry, can't sleep. With all this religion, why can't babies eat? And if the middle class is gone, how can America see? How can America breathe when the oxygen is gone from the American dream? And these American streets listen close as they speak. The next time you think America, please include me. Help the ones that are weak. All they want is a piece of the pie that you keep. Is that too much to ask of those who lay the concrete, still laying on the concrete, pop, pop by the police? See, they, the foundation of the nation, not the 2%. Not the ones that own the building that the middle class rent. Because they make sense. Tell me how you feel.
I used to think that I could box you, but I'm laying down. I wanna know you more. I used to think that I could box you, I'm laying down. I wanna know you more. Lord, I've been told. Lord, I've been told to let you go. Lord, I've been told not good. You're
God, show us the way. The science of opinion. God is not a buffet. You pick what you want, so no God on your plate. The preacher isn't God, religion's first mistake. Serving stewards, shepherds, not kings, has to die to his flesh every day like me. One VIP, all the other certain seats in church are free. We're just groupies, God's the celebrity. Before 313 AD, before Constantine, before the Council of Nicaea, before Romans and Greeks, before Calvin, Alexander, Luther, before Let There Be, before history to the last century, before the death on the tree, before the fall of a man was a picture of me nailed to his heart. Right before the last three words he would speak, it is finished. Can you believe I'm losing my religion? Thank God. Help me lose yours.
I reach out Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love, God, I sing it out. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love.
God, we love you so much, and we thank you for your unconditional, amazing love for us. Lord, as we let religion die, and as we are transformed in the process of becoming more vulnerable, more open, more transparent, more authentic, I pray that the community that grows out of our growth and the change that we experience would just spread your love everywhere. We thank you and we love you. In your name we pray. Amen. We want to invite you to be sure to say hi and give Blair a big hug, our new children's pastor, before you go. She'll be in the back. And also, if you're new, be sure to stop by the info table. We'd love to meet you. And we hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you for being here.